Welcome back to the Tao of Wellbeing. So today I wanted to make a video about some of the things that I found really helpful dealing with my own health condition, and I just wanted to share them in case they might help you. So I've got a little list here, some headings, and I'll just go through them one by one. So the first one was mindfulness. Now, before I got ill, I'd had a long break from meditation, which I'd been into previously. So I had quite a good foundation for getting back into mindfulness practice. Now, there's so many different techniques, methods, teachings out there. One that I found particularly helpful was recommended to me. It's a book called Mindfulness for Health. I think the author was Vijayamala Birch or something like that. And there's some very short meditations. There's a book, but there's also recordings that go with it. Some really short meditations on things like body scans, breathing, compassionate acceptance. That was a really good one. So you just kind of be with whatever you're experiencing, which can be, if you have a health condition, it can be some pretty unpleasant sensations in your body, etc. So just kind of compassionately being with those, and kind of, it's really interesting. You're kind of creating a system within yourself of kind of self-love, self-care, self-compassion, which is a really big part of healing and coping with illness. So mindfulness, brilliant. It's one of those things that some people might consider it a bit woo-woo, a bit out there, but there's actually a lot of peer-reviewed, scientific, evidence-based, evidence that this stuff really does work. But it's one of those things that only works if you do it. It's like medicine, only works if you take it, right? So if you do, whether it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, I mean, depending on what you can manage, obviously it might just be, 1 or 2 minutes literally to begin with, and you might build on that. But if you have some regularity, some diligence around it, find, out of all the thousands of recordings of guided meditations out there, or guided mindfulness practices, find one that really resonates. So you like the voice, it doesn't jar you. It's the right length, it's the right practice. Some people find focusing on the breath a little bit agitating. So if they've got anxiety, sometimes that can actually seem to make things worse. It might be that actually hanging in there you might get past it, but you need to find something that's not challenging. It needs to be something you look forward to doing, basically. And you may well find that with a little bit of time, a little bit of diligence, that just this one thing alone, mindfulness or meditation, will make a big difference to your life. So that's number one. Qigong Tai Chi. So again, I got into Tai Chi in my late teens, and I've kind of done it on and off. But then later on, I got into Qigong, which is kind of like portable Tai Chi. So you don't need to learn a long, elaborate, the form where you have all these movements, and it's like it goes on and on. It's great, but it's it's choreography. You have to learn the choreography. Whereas something like Qigong can be as simple as just holding a posture. So you might be standing and just having holding a tree as one of the postures, or just a simple repetitive movement like this one's called cloud hands. This isn't a lesson. You're not going to learn how to do it from this. I'm just giving you the flavour of it. Yeah. So you do these repetitive movements. And I remember when I got really ill to begin with. I could barely get out of bed. And I had this phrase, by the fives. I don't know where it came from, but it was like, okay, I'll do 5 minutes of Qigong. And that's all I could do. And I'd have to lie back down. But it was kind of making a gesture towards, better health, just that ability to do something rather than just lie there kind of with my own thoughts and kind of suffering. So that really helped. And now I can do fairly extended practice. I'm going to talk a little bit later about what we can infer about other people's stories, like how helpful they are. It's like, well, I tried this and it helped. Is it going to help me? That's another story I'll get to later. Counselling. Now, I was fortunate enough to find an absolutely brilliant counsellor, and it's a lifesaver. I mean, again, I'm fortunate in the sense that before I got ill, I had set up just a little bit of financial well-being. I'm by no means wealthy, but I could afford to pay for counselling, and that, if you can't afford, one of the problems is on the NHS, it's very limited. There's a very long waiting list. Sometimes you get a trainee. You might be lucky, you might not. But the thing about counselling is it's a question of having the right fit, and you may need to try a few different counsellors until you find someone that really works for you. And I've got that, and it's brilliant. So if you find a counsellor, you can work on all of the emotional fallout of illness, which is phenomenal. If you're used to being fit and healthy and successful, active in the world, and suddenly you're like bedridden and you hardly see anyone throughout the day, and your dreams are completely destroyed because you don't know what's coming in terms of your health. Whether at one point I was told I had cancer, Um, and then I was told I had a different cancer. It's hellish. It really is hellish, like the whole health thing, once it goes wrong. And having really good emotional support is crucial. So whether that's from a supportive partner or friends, but ideally, in addition to whatever else you have, a really good counsellor, I can't recommend strongly enough. Building a support network. Now, this is an interesting one because not everyone has the time or the capacity or the whatever. They're not going to meet you in the way that is supportive, even with good intentions always. So finding people that can actually support you practically, that's a big deal if you're incapacitated. Emotionally, sometimes you don't need the kind of, look on the bright side. You need someone that can actually honor where you're at in terms of how devastating your illness can be, um, without necessarily colluding and saying, poor you, but whatever you need. I mean, there's all these ideas about, the kind of help that you should want. And we have this kind of cultural stereotype. I made another video about this, about um, what in nonviolent communication is called being a fix-it jackal. So we have this, it's almost like the go-to response. If someone is expressing emotional suffering, another person in the film or the sitcom or whatever it is will come and sit down next to them and say, yes, but look at it like this. And they just, just fix it for you. It's like, great, okay. So, you know, you've probably thought of most solutions because you're dealing with the illness 24/7. So it's nice that they're trying, but actually there's a kind of, for me, there's almost an inherent lack of respect for the part of ourselves that's actually going through hell and isn't amenable to like just looking on the bright side or trying this pill or that practice or whatever. And I know I'm suggesting things that help, but there's a lot of caveats with that. So yeah, building a support network, and that's difficult because reaching out for help, there's a certain cost involved. You need to make yourself vulnerable. There's a possibility of rejection. There's a possibility of resentment, which I have to deal with in terms of like, I really, in many ways, would have hoped for a more abundant level of support than I've had with this life-changing illness. And at the same time, being grateful for what I do have. And there's that kind of fine line to walk between, gratitude and kind of voicing your needs and making vulnerable requests without imposing a sense of obligation on others. It's like, it's very difficult, I think, for some people to see someone's need and to not to then make that into a kind of internal demand on themselves, and then to resent the internal demand that wasn't even there from the person requesting help. And then suddenly the whole energy has become about that person's internal system, about how they relate to other people's needs. And it's like, actually, I'm having a really hard time here. That's not fun. So support network, it can take some work to find appropriate support, and finding people who are willing. And you might be, I mean, I found myself looking in places I didn't expect to look, and I found support like my local, I don't even know which denomination it is, but there's a local priest who was really, really helpful. I'm not a Christian, but I'm totally open to having someone pray for me and listen to my woes. And he did a great job, the local priest, and I'm very grateful. So, that's a big deal. Building a support network, it's like an ongoing task. Being in nature. Now, if you're lucky enough to be able to just get out your room, get out your bed, get out your door, nature is just so healing. So just walking on the earth, even if, I mean, I don't have a garden. If you have a garden, then great, use your garden. Just put a chair, sit there, just look at the greenery, the trees, the grass, feel your feet on the ground, breathe the air. It's just so supportive. And most days these days, I'm well enough to go for a short walk and to be around trees. And it's just so supportive. And I can't recommend that enough. Next, accepting how ill I am or where I'm at. So it's quite tempting when you become ill you want it to be over with as quickly as possible. So you kind of push on through. And it's a classic thing with like energy illnesses like chronic fatigue, ME, MS, potentially long COVID, whatever it is. I mean, I don't actually have a diagnosis. I've got some kind of weird hybrid of all of these things, which includes some physiological signs like lesions in my brain, but it's not conclusive that it's MS, but that's a whole other story. But just, if you can't do it, you can't do it. If you can't work, you can't work. And it's like, I would love everyone to have the financial means to be able to attend to their health. And the government may or may not support you. I know there's a lot of stress around getting PIP, employment support allowance, if you've been working and then you no longer can. But yeah, you can't do what you can't do. And it's like, it's going to be a serious hindrance to getting better if you're trying to, you know, make your body do stuff that it's just not capable of doing. There's a book that I started reading called The Body Says No. Um, I think some people become ill because they have so many demands on themselves and they're so neglectful of their own needs in the service of other people's needs. I think that can certainly be a contributing factor. But within your means, within, you know, the situation you're in, accept where you're at. You know, if you can, take a year off, you know, and just focus on your health. If you can't, just, you know, do as much as you can for yourself and let people know how bad it is, how much you're struggling. You can't necessarily, you know, you can't help other people if you're in a really bad place, physically, mentally, emotionally. And I know some people have to, you know, I'm not, there's no judgment here. You got, you know, young kids to look after. You're going to do what you can, but please reach out for as much help as you can get. Let people know you're struggling and give as much time and care and nurture to yourself as you possibly can, given your circumstances. And don't deny where you're at to yourself or to others. That feels like a really big deal to me. Now, that's all the things on my list. Oh, well, apart from keep on going on, or keep on keeping on. So, you know, it's very easy to give into despair, particularly if your kind of physical symptoms gang up with your emotional symptoms like depression, anxiety, fear of the future. It can be a horrible kind of like almost a brutal experience, you know, ongoing chronic illness. And at times you just have to be where you're at. It's like, yeah, I feel terrible. I feel hopeless. Maybe I'll call the Samaritans. Maybe there'll be a friend that will come and, you know, drink some tea with me and listen to my woes, whatever, you know, not kind of fighting it. But as a kind of general approach to life, you know, do the 5 minutes, like by the fives, you know, I did my 5 minutes of Tai Chi or whatever, and then go back to bed. And then maybe next day I might do 6 minutes. You know, it's like having this intention to improve and to try things out. So it might be that mindfulness really helps. It might be it's not so good, but you're not going to know until you try. One of the dangers with this is, and I want to make a comment on a video I saw recently about this, but I think it's worth saying here. We can't know necessarily what has made us better if we get better, right? Because we don't have access to what's called the counterfactual. That is what things would have been if I hadn't done that thing, right? So if I didn't do mindfulness, I might have got better anyway. If I didn't try this diet, if I didn't, you know, go to this class or have this positive mindset, I'm better. But it could have been just the way the illness was going anyway. So when people make these claims, it's like I did this and it healed me. There's a real danger of complacency there. And first of all, they might be wrong about the cause of their improvement because it could have been a coincidence. Or it could have been something other than what they think it is. But also, there's a danger then that it's like, well, you know, I can do it. So I fixed my mindset and I got well. Therefore, you should be able to. And if you're still ill, then somehow you're to blame for that because you haven't got the right attitude, you haven't tried the right diet, you haven't meditated enough, blah blah blah. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's a big deal for me actually because I'm really into kind of thinking and thinking about thinking and metacognition and how we kind of interpret data and all that kind of stuff, which I know is not everyone's cup of tea, but just be aware of that error in reasoning. It's like causal relationships, you know, coincidences and cause, correlation and cause is a really big deal. And if you go around telling people that, you know, they should be better because it worked for you, then that's a real compassion hazard. Yeah, so just watch out for that one. And if you find it coming from other people, then, you know, maybe find a way of politely, you know, pointing out that you know, you've tried such and such, you tried all these things and it didn't work, without necessarily making it into like kind of this identity, like I'm someone who doesn't get better and nothing I do works. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a middle way between, you know, having hope, trying stuff out, being open to it, but also acknowledging that, you know, there may not be a miracle cure. You may be incapacitated, not living your ideal life, and that might be how it is forever. I mean, this is something I've had to deal with. Is like I don't know where this thing is going. I don't know if it's going to go down. If it's MS, it could well go down horribly, you know, and that can become a whole, you know, that's a whole thing in itself. So I guess, yeah, what I'm saying is the middle way between optimism. Don't give up hope, but don't have false hope and deny where you're at. And then with all of that, try and, you know, with your network, try and communicate that to others, like what's going on for you, just how incredibly difficult it is. I'm saying this kind of looking at myself on the screen, just advice to myself. I probably should end this video now because I've said everything I want to say. But, I just think, again, the invisible illness thing can't be emphasized enough. It's like people with chronic illnesses that are dealing with like chronic pain, debilitating conditions that drastically limit their lives. It's not always obvious that's what's happening to them. And they may be in dire need. Yeah, they may be in dire need of some practical support. Like, can you do the washing up so I'm not living in squalor? Yeah. Or can you, bring me some food so I don't have to like override what my body is saying, which is like, I just need to lie still for the next 10 hours because my heart's pounding. And, it's like, yeah, I'm still upset about what it's like to be invisibly ill, and what I hoped might come back from me having tried to make people aware of that situation. And I understand how difficult it is, and I understand that people have a lot of demands on their time. And you may not be their priority, and it's not personal. However, and maybe just a note to myself: when I'm well, I've got this whole profound insight into this whole kind of hidden world of the invisibly ill, and whatever health I have and whatever support I can give, I'm only too happy to give, because I have this insight. And I guess you could call that, a silver lining. It's like, my compassion has developed because of that, this kind of awareness of what people are going through that I just wasn't aware of before, until it happened to me. There, but for the grace of God, huh? Okay, thanks for watching. I hope that was of use to some of you, and I'll see you in the next video.